You walk into a room. Maybe it's a party. Maybe it's a work meeting. Maybe it's just a dinner table with people you've known your whole life. And before you even say hello, you're already scanning. You notice the slight pull at the corner of someone's mouth, the way another person crossed their arms right after you sat down, the half-second delay before someone smiled at you, and whether that smile reached their eyes or stopped at their cheeks. You clock all of it, every micro-signal, every shift in energy. You know the temperature of the room before most people have even looked up from their phones, and through all of it, you work hard to make sure nobody notices you noticing. You look down, you look sideways, you find something fascinating about the floor or the middle distance or the glass in your hand, anything but a direct, sustained gaze into another person's eyes. Most people assume that avoiding eye contact means shyness, or social anxiety, or plain rudeness. The world sends that message constantly. Look people in the eye, it shows confidence, it shows respect. But that framing misses everything that matters. Eye contact is one of the most intense forms of human connection. It signals, I see you, I am open to you, I am here. For most people, that feels warm, safe, and natural. But for some of us, it feels like standing in open ground with nowhere to hide. The better question then is not why you can't do it. The better question is, when did you first learn that being truly seen was dangerous? Because somewhere, at some point, probably when you were very small, your nervous system ran an experiment. It looked someone in the eyes, and what it found wasn't warmth. It found unpredictability, anger, rejection, shame, or perhaps just the exhausting weight of someone else's emotional state flooding directly into yours. Your nervous system logged that, and it made a decision, a brilliant, protective, completely understandable decision. Eyes are a doorway. Keep the door closed. That is not a personality flaw. That is a survival strategy. A nervous system adaptation built piece by piece in childhood to keep you emotionally safe in environments that weren't always safe. The clinical language for what happened to you comes largely from the work of psychologist John Bowlby, who developed what we now call attachment theory, the idea that early relationships with caregivers literally wire the way we expect the world to respond to us. When those early relationships were unpredictable, cold, or emotionally overwhelming, children develop what researchers call an insecure attachment style. One of its hallmarks is hypervigilance, a constant unconscious scanning of the social environment for any sign of threat. Avoiding direct eye contact is one of the ways a hypervigilant nervous system manages the flood of information a direct gaze carries. It isn't antisocial. It's self-regulating. There is also something called the spotlight effect, a well-documented psychological phenomenon where we overestimate how much other people are watching and judging us. For people with anxious or avoidant attachment patterns, this effect is amplified dramatically. Every gaze feels like a spotlight. Every locked set of eyes feels like a performance you never rehearsed for, so you sidestep the spotlight every time, and in the short term it always works. Here is what makes this so hard to simply change. It is not just a habit, it is load-bearing. Your sense of self is partially built upon this behavior. Avoiding deep eye contact keeps you in control of how much of yourself gets exposed. It keeps you from being flooded by someone else's emotions. It keeps you from the terrifying vulnerability of being truly, fully seen. And if avoiding all of that is how you've survived, if this is the thing that made rooms manageable, relationships survivable, and the world a little less loud, then someone telling you to just make eye contact is not helpful advice. It is asking you to dismantle the scaffolding while you are still standing on it. You cannot just stop, not because you are weak, but because your brain genuinely, physiologically reads a sustained gaze as a threat signal. The amygdala, the part of the brain that fires during danger, activates more intensely during prolonged eye contact in people with anxious nervous systems. This is real. This is biology. This is not a choice you are making badly. The behavior is not the problem. The behavior is the answer your younger self found to a problem that was very, very real. But here is the part I want to say gently because it matters. This pattern has a cost. When you never let people fully in, when there is always a slight remove, a glass wall between you and the person across the table, relationships slowly become lopsided. You know everyone around you deeply. They know the surface of you. You read every mood shift in the room. Nobody reads yours because you have become very, very good at not broadcasting. Over time, this creates what some therapists call an invisible ledger. You give attentiveness, awareness, and emotional labor in enormous quantities. You receive far less, not because people don't care, but because you have trained them to expect your walls. They don't know they're allowed to look closer. You have never let them. Loneliness does not always look like being alone. Sometimes it looks like being in a full room, perfectly tuned to everyone else's frequency, while you yourself are completely off the air. The path forward is not a checklist. Practice making eye contact for 3 seconds. That is not what this needs. What this needs is something quieter and more honest. It begins with what psychologists call shifting your internal working model. The deep, often unconscious belief about what relationships are, what people do when they get close to you, and whether you are safe to be seen. Those models were written early. They were written under pressure. They made complete sense at the time, but they were written by a child who needed protection that wasn't always there. Part of healing, not fixing, healing, is sitting with the grief of that. The grief for the younger version of you who had to build these walls because the adults in the room could not always be trusted with your softness. That child was right to protect themselves. They were doing the very best they could with what they had. The work now is not to tear the walls down all at once. It is to slowly, in safe relationships, in small experiments with trusted people, begin to collect new evidence. To show your nervous system gently and repeatedly that some doorways are safe to open, that some gazes are not a flood. They are just connections. That takes time. It takes the right people. It often takes a good therapist who understands nervous system work, somatic therapy, EMDR, attachment-focused approaches. There is no shame in needing a guide through terrain this old and this deep.